just talk. Every evening, after dinner, they would sit together and imagine what life could be like outside the busy neighborhood they lived in. They dreamed of open land, quiet mornings, and a place where their children 7-year-old Emma and 10-year-old Daniel could run without worrying about traffic or noise. Life in the suburbs had been good, but they wanted a change, something slower, calmer, and closer to nature. One weekend, their realtor, Melissa, sent them a listing that immediately caught their attention. It was a ranch-style home surrounded by rolling green hills, with a long gravel driveway and wide wooden fences. The pictures alone made them feel peaceful. The price was surprisingly affordable, and the place looked bigger than anything they had expected to find. They all gathered around the laptop, staring at the photos again and again, already imagining what it would feel like to live there. When the family drove out to see the property in person, it was even more beautiful than the pictures. The air smelled fresh, the sky looked wider, and the land around the house stretched so far that it almost felt like it touched the horizon. Emma excitedly ran across the field while Daniel pretended he was a cowboy, stretching his arms like he was riding a horse. Even the family dog, Max, seemed to sense the freedom around him, wagging his tail nonstop. Melissa smiled. "If you want this place," she said, "you should make the offer today. I'm pretty sure you'll be the strongest one." The family exchanged excited looks. They had been waiting for a sign, and this felt like it. By the end of the day, their offer was submitted. Melissa called them later that evening, her voice cheerful. "I told you," she said. "You're the top offer so far. This could be it." That night, the Martinez family talked for hours. They began picturing what their new routines would look like. Emma said she wanted a tree swing. Daniel wanted a small garden where he could grow strawberries. The parents, Luis and Andrea, started planning how they would decorate the house and where they would set up their workspaces. Everything seemed perfect, almost too perfect, but they allowed themselves to feel hopeful. The next morning, Melissa called again, but this time her tone was different. She told them that the seller, a rancher named Bill Hanley, had a reputation for being particular. He wasn't just selling property, he was letting go of a piece of his life. He had lived on the ranch for decades, and according to local talk, he wanted to be sure the next owners would value the land the way he did. Still, Melissa wasn't worried. "You're the strongest offer," she repeated. "I don't see why he wouldn't choose you." But the days passed, and there was no decision. Every time the phone rang, the family hoped for good news. Yet each update from Melissa felt more unclear. She would say things like, "He has some questions," or "He's thinking things over." They didn't understand what else he needed. They had already written a heartfelt letter explaining why they loved the property and how much they respected the lifestyle. On the fourth day, when Melissa called again, she said something surprising. The rancher wanted to meet the Martinez family in person. This was not normal in a real estate deal. Most sellers accepted or declined offers without ever meeting the buyers. The request made Andrea nervous, but Melissa said it might be a good sign. "Maybe he just wants to be sure," she said. The family agreed to the meeting, though they weren't sure what to expect. When they drove to the ranch again, Bill Hanley was already waiting. Leaning against an old wooden fence, he looked exactly like the kind of rancher you'd imagine, tall, weathered, with a calm but serious expression. His hands were rough, and his clothes were worn from years of work. He greeted them politely but without much warmth. He walked them around the land, pointing out the irrigation system, the barns, the fences, and the small creek that ran along the property. At first, everything felt normal. But then Bill began asking questions that felt more personal than necessary. "Do your kids know anything about animals?" he asked, frowning slightly as Emma and Daniel wandered around, admiring everything. Luis explained that they didn't have much experience, but were willing to learn. "Are you planning on changing the land too much?" he asked next. Andrea assured him they wanted to keep the natural feel of the place. "Ever managed irrigation before?" he asked Luis, who shook his head. "No. But I can learn, Luis said with a hopeful tone. Bill nodded slowly. But his eyes stayed thoughtful, as if he was trying to picture them living there, and wasn't sure if it fit the image he had in his mind. Throughout the walk, the Martinez family tried their best to show how respectful and interested they were. They smiled, listened carefully, and expressed their excitement. But something in Bill's eyes remained uncertain. He asked many questions, yet he shared very little about how he felt. When the meeting ended, Bill simply said, "I'll let your agent know." His tone was neither positive nor negative, just neutral. They drove home trying to read between the lines, but there was nothing clear to hold on to. That evening, Melissa called. Her voice was gentle, which instantly made Andrea worry. "He's leaning toward another offer," Melissa said quietly. The words hit the family like a surprise. They had done everything right. They had the strongest offer. They had shown genuine interest. How could someone else suddenly be ahead? Luis asked Melissa who the other buyers were, but she didn't know much yet. All she knew was that Bill seemed unsure about the Martinez family, even though their offer was the best financially. Andrea felt confused and a little hurt. "What else could we have done?" she asked. Melissa sighed. "I'm not sure. But sometimes sellers choose with their heart, not the numbers." The family tried not to lose hope, but the uncertainty made the next few days feel heavy. Every time the phone rang, they jumped. Every email notification made them nervous. The excitement that once filled their home had turned into quiet waiting. The children didn't understand the details, but they sensed the tension. Daniel asked, "Are we still moving?" And Emma asked, "Did he not like us?" Those questions only made Andrea feel more unsure. The Martinez family found themselves caught between hope and disappointment. They had fallen in love with the ranch so quickly that they had already pictured their lives there. Losing it felt like losing something they had almost touched. Yet, deep inside, they still hoped something might change. They hoped Bill would see their sincerity. They hoped he would realize how much the property meant to them. They hoped their dream wasn't slipping away. But for now, all they could do was wait. Wait for a decision from a rancher who seemed to care about more than just a good offer. A rancher whose choice would change everything. The Martinez family spent the next morning feeling unsettled. They still didn't know the details of the other offer, but the fact that they were no longer the rancher's first choice weighed on their hearts. Luis sat quietly at the breakfast table, stirring his coffee without drinking it. Andrea kept checking her phone as if waiting might change the outcome. The children, sensing the tension, stayed quieter than usual. Around noon, Melissa finally called. She had new information, and this time her tone was apologetic even before she explained. She told them that the other offer came from a young couple who grew up in the same county. They wanted to start a small cattle operation and had experience working on farms. Their offer was lower than the Martinez family's, but Bill already knew of their families. He liked that they had roots in the area and understood ranch life. To him, it wasn't just a sale. He wanted someone who would continue what he had spent a lifetime building. When Melissa said this, everything suddenly made sense. Yet it made the Martinez family feel even more helpless. They had been the strongest offer in every official way: finances, readiness, timing, but none of that mattered to Bill as much as his personal feelings about the land. He wanted to pass his ranch to someone who shared his background. Luis leaned back on the couch and sighed. "So it was never about the offer," he said softly. "It was about what he imagined for the land." Andrea nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. "We can't change who we are," she whispered. "We showed him our hearts. And maybe that's all we could do." Over the next couple of days, the waiting grew even heavier. Melissa tried to stay hopeful, telling them that nothing was final yet. But even she had a hint of doubt in her voice. The Martinez family tried to distract themselves, but everything reminded them of the ranch. Emma kept asking when they'd get to visit the big field again. Daniel talked about the garden he had hoped to start. Even Max, the dog, seemed restless, wandering from room to room, like he missed the open land they had once walked on. On the 5th day since the meeting, something unexpected happened. Melissa called early in the morning. sounding surprised. Bill wanted to meet the Martinez family one more time. He had asked for it specifically, with no explanation. The family wasn't sure what to feel, hope, or fear, but they agreed to go. As they drove out to the ranch again, the sky looked bright, and the fields were lit beautifully by sunlight. It made them emotional just seeing the place again. The thought of losing it felt even harder as they approached. Bill was waiting near the barn this time, standing next to a wooden post with his hat tilted slightly to block the sun. His expression was calm but serious. He greeted them with a small nod, then motioned for them to join him on a short walk toward the open pasture. He didn't talk at first. He just walked slowly, hands in his pockets, looking out across the land as if trying to memorize every inch of it. The Martinez family walked beside him, unsure of how to start the conversation. Finally, Bill exhaled deeply and spoke. "I wanted to see you again," he began. "This place means a lot to me. It's been my home for longer than I can count. I'm not just selling land. I'm letting go of part of my life." He paused and looked at them, his eyes thoughtful. "You folks seem good," he said. "Really good. I can tell you would take care of the house, and you'd love it here. But this land, it needs a certain kind of work, the kind that comes from experience, the kind that takes years to understand." Andrea listened quietly, her heart already tightening. She knew what was coming, but Bill wasn't unkind. He was just honest. "The other couple," he continued, "they grew up around this. They know the rhythm of the place. They know what it takes. And I feel like my ranch will stay closer to what it's been in their hands." Luis nodded, even though the words stung. There was nothing to argue. They respected Bill's feelings. "We understand," Luis said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We wanted this place because it felt peaceful, and we would have done our best. But we respect your decision." Bill looked at him with a quiet sincerity. "I know," he said softly. "And that's why I wanted to tell you myself. You deserved that." Andrea felt a wave of emotion rise inside her, but she stayed composed. She thanked him for considering them. The children, sensing the mood, stayed close to their parents, quietly listening. Before they left, Bill added, "You might not feel it now, but you'll find a place that's meant for you. Sometimes, losing what you think you want is just part of finding what's truly right." The family nodded, but in their hearts, the loss felt heavy. Driving away from the ranch for the final time was harder than they expected. The long gravel driveway, the open fields, the wooden fences, they had already imagined a life there. Letting go felt like closing the door on a distant dream. That night, the house felt unusually quiet. Luis and Andrea tried to comfort each other, reminding themselves that everything happens for a reason. They still had a dream of living in the countryside, even if this ranch hadn't worked out. They had to believe that something better was waiting. The next morning, they told the children gently that the ranch wasn't going to be their new home after all. Emma's eyes watered a little, but Andrea hugged her and said, "It's okay. We're going to find a place that's perfect for us." Daniel nodded, trying to be strong, even though he looked disappointed. The children bounced back quickly, but for the parents, the disappointment lingered longer. Days turned into a week, and then two. The Martinez family slowly began looking at new listings again, though none of them felt exciting. Every house seemed too small, too noisy, or too modern. They wondered if they had been too attached to the ranch and if their expectations were now too high. They questioned whether they would ever find a place that felt right. Then, one afternoon, Melissa sent them a message with a new listing that had just come up. She wrote, "This one might surprise you." The family opened the link, expecting another simple home, but their eyes widened as soon as the photos loaded. The property was larger than the ranch they had wanted, with a more modern layout and upgraded features. It had plenty of land, beautiful views, and a clean, welcoming design. They decided to visit it the next morning. When they arrived, something felt different right away. The owner, a retired teacher named Mrs. Turner, greeted them warmly. She smiled at the children, offered them lemonade, and even let Max run around the yard without worrying. She showed them every corner of the house with pride and encouraged them to explore freely. There was no tension, no testing questions, no uncertainty. Everything felt open, simple, and calm. The land wasn't a working ranch. It didn't require special knowledge or years of experience. It was meant to be enjoyed, not managed. And as the Martinez family walked through the property, they realized something important. This place fit them perfectly. They could already see their lives unfolding naturally here. The children imagined playing under the big oak trees. Luis and Andrea pictured peaceful evenings on the porch. Everything felt right, in a way the ranch never fully had not. Because the ranch wasn't beautiful, but because this place felt like it was meant for them. When they made an offer, Mrs. Turner accepted it with happiness, saying she wanted the home to go to a family who would love it as much as she had. There was no stress, no competition, no emotional tests to pass. Just a clean, joyful exchange. On the day they moved in, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset, Andrea looked at Luis and said, "Now I understand what Bill meant. Losing the ranch led us here." Luis took her hand and smiled. "Sometimes the road takes a turn for a reason," he said. "And maybe this was our turn." The Martinez family realized that what feels like a loss can sometimes be the beginning of something better. They found peace, happiness, and a sense of belonging in a place they hadn't expected. And in the end, the rancher's decision, though painful at the time, had quietly guided them toward the home that was truly meant for them.